I'm happy to welcome Sergio Rata from Edifecs, and he's going to present this next session, Prior Auth, Consent, and FHIR, oh my. And Sergio is the AVP of Product Management at Edifecs, and he is responsible for product management and strategy for Edifecs Smart Trading portfolio. And he brings more than 2 decades of expertise in healthcare and integration and product management and engineering. So this topic is right in his sweet spot. So welcome, Sergio.
Thank you, Nancy. Actually, I'm trying to get to my screen share. Give me a second. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So I would like to talk to you about the CMS 57F regulation, but from a little bit different perspective than what's usually covered. But first, just a quick refresher, and I promise I don't have that many slides. I want to get to the demo. But 57F has a number of regulation statutes, but one is related to some updates to patient access API, and kind of the most important one is related to visibility into prior authorizations, and of course some statistics usage of the prior authorization API itself. A new statute is about the provider access API, essentially removing the friction from ability for the providers to get data from payers or payers to share data with providers. Peer-to-peer update, it's about ability for essentially member data to travel along with the payer as he switches from plan to plan. So the new payer should be able to fetch easily without much, again, friction, removing friction to get the data from the old plan. And then the prior authorization API itself, again, removing burden from the providers to communicate those prior authorizations, ability to find out whether prior authorizations are even needed, and if they are needed, kind of what documentation is required to be submitted. So this is the kind of the gist or the main points of 57F. There are other statutes, but I would say from technology perspective, these are kind of most interesting ones. But one thing that people kind of should be thinking, so let's say, the date comes in January 1st, 2027. So then what's next? One thing that people will realize that the removing of the barriers for the providers to submit prior authorizations, this of course implies that providers now will start submitting more and more clinical data. And now that clinical data will have more avenues to be shared with other entities. So, I mean, the CMS 57 itself talks about the new provider and the peer-to-peer APIs. But there are other, avenues how payers can share that data with providers or, with other payers, and depend on different use cases. So this naturally leads to the question of consents. So much data sharing, meaning that members will have a say, and there's going to be a new acute need for rich and very flexible information sharing controls. And it's no wonder that there has been propping up so many new, actually, even on the regulation side, there is consent laws and policies propping up. There is, on the federal level, CMS 57F itself talks about the so-called opt-in and opt-out clauses. So basically for peer-to-peer exchange, member has to issue an explicit consent to opt in into the peer-to-peer exchange. While from the provider API perspective, member has the option to opt out from this communication. From Federal Confidentiality of Substance Abuse Disorder rule, which is actually already effective, it says that Payers should not be sharing substance abuse disorder patient records without explicit consent from the patient himself. So there's some examples of federal laws at the state level. California has been advancing on this front. So we know that there is, certain statutes that prohibit sharing cost-related information with other entities, or the California bills AB 352 and AB 254 actually again have some clauses related to sharing of information, related to abortion, and again the same kind of theme that patient information with other entities should not be shared without explicit consent from the patient himself. And there is also multiple policies as it relates to person-to-person information sharing. So, for example, there is concept of related persons, such as guardians or legal representative, caretakers, parents, and so on. And again, there is complex use cases around information sharing, and again, it requires sometimes consent from the patient to be able to share that information. And then, as it comes to family, things getting even more complex because there is minors involved, mature minors, and there are again different rules around that. So, for example, subscribers should have full access to minors' data, but subscribers should not have full access to the mature minor data, which may have the options to hide certain data, such as abortion, pregnancy-related things. And subscriber definitely should not have access to any of adult dependents' data unless he's given explicit consent. So you can see that this is the area of consent and data sharing actually is quite complex landscape. And let's explore again quickly how this is done today. Of course, this it is being done, but it is, I would say, very manual and it's very fragmented space. So today, members have the option either to make some phone calls, or they have to fill out different forms and submit to the payer. The payer side, those things are being recorded in some kind of a centralized document management system or some document store. So there is legal proof that the member has provided that consent. That information has been verified. There's some gates that has to go through. Unless and until then, somebody has to go and manually update certain applications that would now allow data sharing. So you can see this is a very cumbersome process. It's a lengthy process. There is so many entities involved. So no wonder this also is not convenient to the member. And if the member wants to make any changes, this again leads to repeat of the whole process. So definitely not the most ideal scenario. And again, this is, like I mentioned, this is done in a fragmented way. So not everything, it depends on application, depends on the use case. Certain things may or may not even fall into this process. So of course, it desires a kind of a better state. So I would like to quote Thomas Edison. So there is a way to do it better. You just need to find it. So we at Edifecs sat down and thought through this problem more holistically, even though the origin of this problem kind of started with CMS 57F, but we thought about it beyond that. So what does it mean to manage consent? So lo and behold, actually, I would like to introduce the Edifecs consent management. It is a module, an application that totally sits on top of the Edifecs FHIR gateway. And you might know Edifecs FHIR gateway, it has a lot of different components, the FHIR repository itself. It has the FHIR endpoint management, a number of implementation guides that supports natively, partner management, allows payers to go into and look at the data, and we also have developer portal allowing third-party applications and third-party entities to come in and connect. But on top of this FHIR gateway, we developed consent management. Consent management consists of two parts. One is the user interface, what we call consent administration. It's a portal, and it is primarily, it's for the members themselves or the pair representatives. So members can come in, and through this consent administration UI, they can come in and they can manage their consent. There is a user interface. There, of course, there is, behind the scene, there's rules set up, different policies, and the consent themselves are also being stored within this application. Now, once the consent are being issued using this application, and of course, it depends on the consent, depends on use case, internal pair admins or security officers may need to be involved. They need to maybe to approve certain things. So there's also definitely a human workflow component to it. But once the consent is kind of been issued and it is quote unquote done, and then there is the consent runtime kicks in. So it injects the consent runtime works beautifully together with the Edifecs FHIR gateway, but can also be used, of course, beyond FHIR. But the main idea is to, depending on the use case, the runtime selects the right consent to be applied in a specific case and enforces that consent. So if the consent is about not sharing specific data, then there is rules, there is engine that actually filters out the data so that the data that is not specified in the consent is not being shared with other entities. So this is the very high level overview of how the Edifecs solution works. And I would like to get to the demo. I want to present to you how this actually would work from a member experience. So for this demo, I'm going to be using some fictitious family, which consists of Lara Miran. She's the subscriber, she's a mom. And there is John Miran, who is the adult dependent, the spouse. And they just moved from New York to California. So they, in the first scenario, I would like to present you how Lara can actually manage the pair-to-pair consent, the opt-in clause of the CMS 57 rule. So Lara will log into the system. She will essentially go to California health plan, log into the system, and she will actually issue consent to New York health plan, allowing California to fetch data from New York. So with that, let me actually go ahead with the presentation. So this is the portal where, again, imagine that the California Medicaid can post for their members. And it's been branded, it has, branding, colors, and so on, capabilities. So the members would come in, they would log in, and they would enter their information. Lara Miran is logging in. And here's the dashboard, and she has multiple options. We are going to select pair consents. So on this, once I selected pair consent, I can see, options that I can issue consent to previous pair, or I can see what the consents are, that came up from other pairs. So in this case, I'm in California, Lara is at California. She wants to issue consent to fetch data from the previous pair, which is New York Medicaid in this case. So she would click issue consent. She would select the pair. This is New York Medicaid. She would put the effective dates, all the information required. And then essentially she needs to sign this consent. So she hereby acknowledges that this information is correct and she signs it. So you see how easy it is, and the consent has been issued. You see how easy it is from a member perspective, the experience to issue consent. No more phone calls, no more complicated forms to fill out, just a few clicks and it's done. So with this, I conclude the first use case of the demo. Let me move on to the next one. So on the next use case, what I would like to present is the so-called opt-out capability that is specified in CMS 57F. And to remind you, the statute is about ability allowing the member to opt out sharing data with specific providers. So in this case, the use case is that Lara Miran, since she moved from New York to California, she doesn't want her data to be accessible by New York providers anymore. Even if, they may be, for whatever reason, they may still be maybe in the provider network. She doesn't want that data to be accessible by New York providers at all. So she, in this use case, I'm going to demonstrate that she can log into consent management, select the provider, and essentially revoke the consent. Again, the reminder is, by default, the consents are issued, and members can revoke those consents. And of course, they can change their mind. They can definitely reissue those consents, but the default state of the system that the consent is auto-issued, and then the member can come in, choose the consent, and revoke it. So that's what I'm going to present. So again, coming back to Lara, she's on her home dashboard. This time she would choose provider consents. And once she clicks that, she can see all the consents that have been issued to different providers. In this specific use case, you can use search capability to find the provider. Let's say it's a New York hospital. She can see the details, and right here, she can either edit or she can just select this revoke consent option. She click on this. Of course, she will get prompted to confirm this, and then it's done. So you see how easy it is to, from a member perspective, to revoke consent. The opt-out essentially is not even something to be talked about. It's just so simple from a member perspective. Of course, behind the scene, the machinery is way more complicated, but our goal is to make life as easy as possible for the members. In the third use case, I want to present something more complex. So the example here is that Lara Miran, she's the subscriber, but she would like to share all her data with her husband, but accept some sensitive information. So Lara can invite John as an authorized representative and issue that consent. And in that case, then John can access Lara's information using, through patient access API or through any other means. So all the machinery behind the scene would automatically kick in to honor that consent. So again, I will start the demo with Lara. She is in the consent management UI. And this time on the dashboard, she would choose the authorized representative consents. She would click here, and here she already sees John Miran, the spouse. One authorized representative is found. The reason we already kind of pre-fill this is because John is already part of Lara's policy, so we automatically add all the members of the policy to the screen, so she can just choose them, use them to issue consent. If this were to be use case of some external party, maybe like a lawyer or guardian, those kind of things, then the workflow would be a little bit more complex. She would start with the inviting the representative to the system. The representative would sign in, would confirm that, and then after that, the experience is kind of similar. So in this example, Lara, she chose John Miran. She selected John Miran, and on the right-hand side, she can issue consent. So let's click on that issue consent, and what you can see, it's a kind of a form, and this form is behind the scene. Again, the FHIR is able to completely customize, and essentially Lara can share the information with John, except the following. So she clicks off, she doesn't want any HIV information, alcohol and substance abuse related information to be shared with her husband. You see how simple it is from a member experience perspective. She just checks off, certain categories of things. Of course, behind the scene, this will trigger, generating consent resources in the FHIR server, putting specific ICD codes or SNOMED codes, or so it's a lot of complexity behind the scene how this machinery would work. But again, from a member perspective, it's a very easy to understand form. Lara can easily make her choices. And of course, after that, she would sign it. So she would click on sign. She acknowledges that this information is correct, and she would e-sign it. So you see how simple this is from a Lara perspective to use consent management. So this concludes my demo. In the end, I would like to kind of summarize that CMS 57F, the whole philosophy of this rule is to remove barriers, remove friction for more free form data flow between providers and payers, from providers to payers, and from payers back to providers. And of course, very few people realize, but this will inevitably lead to explosion in clinical data. Just CMS 57 alone will lead to that. But there is other use cases that the industry is looking at where even more information is going to be shared. So just brace yourself. Clinical data is here to stay, and it's going to be a lot of it. So the kind of the repercussion of that is that definitely you need to be able to, as an organization, to manage consent, whether this is paper-based process that you have today or more advanced digitized tools. But this is a must-have. This is no longer kind of I can or cannot. And essentially, since also because this is now targeted by different regulations, both at federal, state laws. So my advice is you need to have a comprehensive solution. And the solution should not be just looking at FHIR. It has to go beyond FHIR capabilities. And Edifecs definitely offers so. And when I'm saying some capabilities beyond FHIR, of course, consent management is just one tenet, but you need to have a very strong integration engine. You need to have, believe it or not, strong EDI engine also, because EDI is here to stay. And EDI and FHIR, they're going to be commingling, moving forward. Again, that's something that for a few years, at least, is going to be here. And in this journey, you will need a trusted partner. So again, Edifecs is a technology vendor that is being trusted by top health plans in the country across multiple lines of business. We've been in the business for a very long time. Just choose Edifecs to solve your problems. So this concludes my presentation. Thank you very much. And I'll open up the floor for any questions that you may have.
At this time, sure. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat or any comments. Or if you have a lengthy comment or question, we can unmute you. I guess one of the things I was thinking about as you were talking at the beginning with the different state laws, federal laws, and maybe you said this and I just missed it. Does this system have all that embedded into it so that it automatically knows that what is required in California or what's the requirement in New York, Texas, whatever?
Yes, so we continuously monitor the regulatory landscape, and out of the box, the product already comes with so-called templates. So if you're a plan in California, we already have those rules baked in. Again, those consents and forms that you've seen in the demo, they're template-based, and you can use one of those templates and definitely can further customize to suit your needs. But that's kind of already there in the library. And as this is a Edifecs hosted, in the Edifecs cloud infrastructure. So the beauty of that is that as new regulations come in, we keep updating our library. So that's again another benefit of this solution.
That's great, and that's got to be quite the task to stay on top of everything that's going on.
That's what we do.
So any other questions? And the way you were walking through the demo, you had it that the subscriber, goes in and manages the consent. And you mentioned about I was trying to think of how you mentioned that. You mentioned about
well, there are more,
yeah.
of course. I did not show the full breadth of the product. I just want to give you kind of icing on the cake. But there are more complex use cases such as legal guardian or legal representative, so that somebody else may log into the system and issue consent on behalf of Lara, for example. That use case is also there. Yeah, and so managing consent, and then I did not show that, but there is also the the whole minor or adult minor use case.
I was going to bring that up. I was wondering what happens when it's when it's an adult who's under still in the health plan. It gets into a complicated situation.
Very complicated, very quickly, very complicated, because some states they have if minor, the parent should be able to look at all the data. But the moment that minor turns, I think 12, it depends on the state. Then certain things should turn on in the systems. Now they have rights or capability now to come in and start filtering some of the information, not all. And then once they turn, I think 21 or 18, again, depends on each state, then they may have capability to turn off completely the whole thing. So very complicated. And as time passes by, how to turn on or turn off those consents, and there's so many rules. It's a very complex and fascinating area, to be honest.
There's a question from Dan in the chat. He says the demo has a patient revoking access by a provider. If a patient wants to add provider access, do you provide a list of providers? And what is the process of registering providers?
So there are two different things. One is the registration of the provider by the payer. And in the diagram, what I showed is, Edifecs FHIR gateway. So the whole registration and the management of the provider API happens within Edifecs FHIR gateway. So this is completely independent of the member themselves. It's, the provider has been registered with the payer. They issued, token, client ID, secrets, and so on. They've been registered as, different types of, what type of provider. Then, of course, I didn't talk about this whole member attribution process going on behind the scene. But then, from member perspective, they can just come into the consent management portal, and they can see the list of providers that, they have, either they have some kind of a relationship, or even they know they're going to have a relationship. So they can essentially browse the provider directory and initiate or give a consent, especially if they revoke that consent prior to that. But again, that's why I was saying the rules are so complex. CMS 57F says the member has the option to opt out, meaning that by default, actually the consents are already there in the system. And I didn't talk about, so right now it's all just binary, it's there, not there. But the thing is even more complex because there's granularity. I may actually allow the provider to see certain, but not everything, why my massagist need to know about my, smoke abuse or so, different types of conditions, has nothing to do with. So I'm able to actually, on a more granular level, to go and issue those consents or edit them.